is now the gateway to the bell.
Swing and get up, baby! Get up! Get up! Get up! Get up! Home
The game is over. The series is over. The wait is over.
What's happening, nerds? This is John, Nerdy Out with Cards, with another Ozzie Smith weekend. And the scope of this theme, or whatever you want to call it, of this video is, still learning about cards. And I'll get into that. But I was watching a video last night of Dave over at Peacemaker Cards, and he picked up his 1993 Barry Larkin Topps Finest Refractor. It was a gold card for him this year, understandably. And, it's an excuse for me to show my Ozzie, right? But, that 1993 Finest Refractor. And, he's a Barry guy. I'm an Ozzie guy. Their careers overlapped a lot. They both played shortstop. They both won Gold Gloves, Hall of Famers, all that good stuff. And it was so awesome to see Dave pick up that card. I was happy for him. And, that's just an example of, people, pumping out their videos, talking about their goals, and then they're picking up their gold cards, or they're picking up this card, that card. And when you know what kind of collector they are, especially if you feel a kinship to them, it's just so awesome to see that. But the moving on from that, back in 2023, and I've talked about this, I developed an Ozzie Smith checklist that I operate off of, and this is all front and back. This is what I did in my boredom. But when I did that, because I was utilizing the PSA Master registry set, I was using trading card database, and then there was cards that I had that weren't on either. Then I learned more cards that are on the Ozzie Smith or through the Ozzie Smith Facebook group, and so I learned about a bunch of cards I did not have at that time. And so one of the things I did was, because a lot of them were super cheap, and that was great, because I could spend 20, 30, 40 bucks on Ozzie Smith cards and get like 20 or 30 of them because they were so cheap. But a couple of the avenues that I did that through, or platforms, was ComC and eBay. And I remember, especially more so ComC, because they got usernames of who you're buying them from. And there was this username called Running Redbirds. And I remember that sticking out because it's Cardinal Lee kind of name. And he's selling a bunch of Ozzie Smith cards, right? And so, I did that at the time. And recently, I had bought a card off of eBay from that same seller. And, it comes in. And of course, now it's getting shipped to a local address rather than am I in Seattle or California, like those kind of things. So in it, there was a note. And so the guy's name is Michael. And he's like, hey, I set up at this card show in Collinsville. And it's like the first Saturday of the month or something like that. And he goes, I got a ton of Aussies, a ton of Yachties, and this is where I set up. And I was like, cool. So I go to the show. And the only reason why I went to that show was just to meet him, because he wrote that note out and everything. So I was like, I think this would be really cool. Now I get to the show and he did forewarn me. He goes, it's a lot of TCG, but the when I say a lot, like when I was there, because I ended up walking around the whole place at one point, I would say it's like 95% TCG, and I know a lot of y'all hate that. And I understand the why behind it, but that's going to make this story even more wild, right? Because I've been to like the Orlando Garden show that Joe and Chris and all of them have talked about, and there's amazing stuff there. Don't get me wrong, but I'm here talking to you about Ozzie Smith right now, right? And so I'm just sitting there and I'm talking to Michael and everything, and that was a lot of fun. And so he's got like a box, like 5-row box or whatever it is, and it's nothing but Ozzie and Yachties. And he's also got a showcase, and that's more of like the inserts, more expensive stuff. And it's got a bunch of Aussies and Yachties in there. And I ended up picking up several cards from him that I'll show at the end of the month with Adam. But he also had this binder, this small binder of Aussie cards. And some guy was flipping through them. And as I'm standing there, I'm just kind of like looking around, and I saw something that kind of like stuck out. And so when the guy was done with the binder, I started flipping through it. And I was like, man, that card does not look familiar. And I was like, you know what? I was like, how much are the cards in the binder? And he's like, they're like $1. Like, for $1, I'll go ahead and pick it up, and if I have it, I have it. If I don't, then that's amazing, right? And that card is this 1992 Panini baseball, and it's a sticker. And you see 17 out of 40. That'll become more important here in a second. But it's like this guessing game kind of thing. And of course, that's Ozzy. But it comes on the back of a Bill Spires card. This one. I did not have this card. you know, and I said I spent a lot of time on this checklist, and I did not have this card. And to be honest, in the time since then, I've not cross-referenced this with trading card database. Um, but that's kind of here nor there, right? Because this is my checklist. This is a card, and so but we're so Michael's like, yeah, and he goes, and there's also another one because it also comes on the back of a Jim Gantner card. So shout out to Rob over there at Bucks and Six. We know all about his Jim Gantner story. But for the purposes of my collection, though, I'm not going to get the one with Jim Gantner because the one that comes on the Jim Gantner card is still number 17 out of 40 for this. That's just how I collect. All right. However, when I was looking this up and whatnot, there's also a French version. And the French version comes on the back of both cards, Bill Spires and Jim Gantner. So, yes, the French version I do want to get. That to me is a different Ozzie Smith card. And so I'll try to get the Jim Gantner Canadian, Ozzie Canadian for that one. But the thing is, how wild is it that I go to a show that had maybe three sports tables and come away with a new Ozzie Smith card? An Ozzie Smith card I did not know about, right? And but this is just proof. It's just like I've been operating off this list for a few years. I've been collecting Ozzy for going on my 34th year, and I'm still learning about cards. And it's kind of ironic that last night, messaged Rob a little bit back and forth, and he's like, "Yeah, there's still a whole lot for me to learn." And like my response to him was like, "Don't we all?" Right? And it seems like one of those things, like the more you know, the more you don't know, kind of thing. It's so wild, right? And I thought that was just freaking amazing. But to go along with pickups, because this came in yesterday too. But I got this bigger card, 1996 aficionado first pitch preview. Pretty sick card, right? And like that, AKA the Wizard. So the one I'm missing of this, the variant of this card I'm missing now is the artist proof, because it is a pinnacle card. Going back to that artist proof video I did, but again, like this card, I mean, I was actively collecting in 1996. I was 11, but I wasn't up to date on like the hobby news and the ins and outs of all the sets and everything, especially at that time because there were so many. But that's where, like, when I did develop this checklist, that's when I learned about this card. You know, but like I said, I thought it was kind of it's fun to know that there's more out there that you can learn about. I'm thinking that this Ozzie Smith checklist is 900 some odd cards, but there's a potential that I could go to a card show that is dominated by Pokemon and get a new Ozzie Smith card. I would take that over any show, damn near. You know what I mean? Because, but that's just me. And I totally understand that. But I thought that was really cool. I think Tops 85401, Nate, he was talking about this recently. It's like, humble, being humble and whatnot. And I think this kind of speaks to that. So, but I just wanted to talk about these cards, uh, the theme with them and whatnot. But this is how I'm nerding out, and y'all keep learning about new cards.